Did I ever tell you about that one time that I went into a drug den in Puerto Rico for a story? No? Let's go.
It was January 2018, 6 months after Hurricanes Irma and Maria swept through and devastated Puerto Rico. The tourism department invited me to come check out the place. We're back and open for business, they said.
So business as usual for us as of December 20th. But it's not just about being open for business. It's really about making a comeback.
They wanted me to spread that message, and I'd be happy to, but I'm not just going to take your word for it. I need to see for myself. Walking around San Juan, something was eerily weird. It was the high season for tourists, normally super crowded, but the streets were empty.
They're not here. Those tourists are not here, so I believe they think there's no electricity in the island, but we already, more than 70%, we got it back up.
That's Hector. We'll get to him in a bit. The news coverage of the devastation to the islands from the hurricanes had been amplified. Remember this? Yup. That was this moment in time. So all of these images kept tourists away. And remember, it was the high season, January, the middle of winter. Tourism is an important industry to Puerto Rico's economy. In 2019, nearly 4 million travelers visited, and that was after the government invested about $100 billion on rebuilding the infrastructure after the hurricanes. And I could already see this investment walking down the streets of San Juan, the capital city, the largest and the most famous. You'd be hard-pressed to notice any hurricane damage. Remember, $100 billion. And if there was a place to put those dollars, it was the front-facing first stop for tourists municipality of San Juan. Because when I visited other cities like Ponce, we put our drone in the sky and saw this. Blue tarps everywhere. So we knew what the tourism department was telling me was just what they wanted me to tell you. A very optimistic picture of where they stood.
What we know so far is that Puerto Ricans are resilient. And we know that they've spent millions of dollars to repair San Juan and Old San Juan where the tourists go. But what about La Perla?
So back in San Juan, my filming partner Fitz and the guy I mentioned earlier, Hector, were chatting about the neighborhood of La Perla. Fitz was familiar because his ex-girlfriend was Puerto Rican and he had made visits there in years past. But basically, La Perla is the hood, with a reputation of being the hood. It has a legacy of being dangerous, drugs, violence, like the kind of hood where the police abandon and let the streets run themselves. So we chatted up with Hector and then he invites us to La Perla. He says he appreciated the way we handled his interview and knowing we were searching to hear from real people, not just government authorized voices. He says he can help take us to see the people. And then Fitz and I just follow.
Tú eres el imán y yo soy el metal. Me voy acercando y voy armando el plan.
That's a clip from the music video Despacito, which topped the music charts for 110 weeks during this time. And it was filmed in La Perla. Hector tells us that tourists now wander into the hood in search of the murals seen in the video, which can be very dangerous for them because it's my understanding that you have to be invited and then escorted through as we were. Now, La Perla was established in the late 19th century and the place where former enslaved people and homeless non-white servants were allowed to live. It was intentionally created away from the main city center, outside of the city walls.
We're what you call even low economic or poor people, which I resent.
That's Norma, another person we interviewed for the story. By the way, we were filming for my adventure travel show Beyond the Usual. So, Norma explains the dynamics of living in La Perla. It's part of San Juan, but treated so differently just outside of the fort walls. Once we entered the neighborhood, I can remember vividly the entire street stopped. We were not only strangers, Fitz and I both had large professional camera gear. We were not inconspicuous. So Hector says, they're working. Don't worry. I'll get permission. You know, they're working, like working. I try to play it cool, but this was beyond my little sheltered suburban girl's personal experience. So I hope I played it cool. Unfortunately, I don't have this bit on video, and we only started filming once we got to the precise street and house that we got permission for. Hector had to go to each working person and tell them who we were. And then they looked us up and down. It was very much intimidating, yes. And then they let us pass. And there were about 4 guys along the way that we had to do this with. It was kind of like territories. I don't know. I remember moving very slowly through, and every single person on the street remained frozen with their eyes on us. Like no transactions, no movement. They didn't want us to see what they were doing. We were not going to see what they were doing. And quite frankly, I didn't want to see what they were doing. Now check this out. We eventually made it to the street and the house. It's just tattered. Clearly overlooked, abandoned, thrown away. But I'm going down the wrong path with this story. You can watch more about what Norma, Hector, and others I met after the hurricanes had to say and how the government treated Puerto Rico in the episode of Beyond the Usual. Hector points us to the drug den. That's what they called it. But then he tells us to wait. He needs to get permission. So we're waiting a while. Fitz goes off to film some B-roll, and then suddenly I'm alone, unescorted, crossing my fingers, hoping that no one comes by. Fitz comes back saying someone did question him. He laughed it off, and I'm like, dude, be safe.
They won't eat if I'm here, right? They're coming. I'm not gonna eat you, man. No.
Hector finally comes back and says we're okay to go in. So sadly, no video inside of the drug den, and quite frankly, we could have, but here's where I made an ethical call. The people inside were so out of it that every time I thought it was interesting or compelling enough to pull up my camera or even my cell phone, it felt exploitative. And I'm simply not that kind of sensationalist reporter. For what we were shooting, there wouldn't be a point to film those people in that state. Sure, it would be helpful now to tell this story, so I'm going to try my best to tell you what I saw. We stood in the doorway while our guy presented us and why we were there. The apparent queen of the place was named Chabela. That's actually why we were there. She had this infamy. She was kind of a urban legend, running this ethical and clean drug den. So she was sitting inside, and she was in a daze that I had never witnessed in person, like a drug stupor. Another woman, she actually got her bachelor's degree in Wisconsin and then came back home to Old San Juan. That was Norma. She was kind of like the gatekeeper. She vetted us, of course, looked us up and down. She had all the questions. Everybody else was silent. So we were standing in the doorway, not sure where to put ourselves, and Norma says, "Sweetie, if the fumes of crack cocaine bothers you, you may want to move out of the doorway. You could sit over there." So Norma was sitting at the table across from Chabela, and she was preparing crack. She was heating a spoon, and the lighter underneath. I'd never seen this except for in the movie. So Fitz and I, we tried to be gracious and waited until she felt comfortable enough so that we could go outside and do our interview. So we were making small talk with the other people inside, and actually different people started to slowly come out of the rooms as it seemed that Norma cleared us. Everybody started to open up. There was actually a guy in a neon t-shirt that we saw out in the park where we met Hector, and he was running programs that served kids. And he was in the drug den telling me about how he was an outcast in his family. He'd been hard on his luck, but he's going to make it one day soon. They were friendly. They were just like many of the other islanders you've likely encountered. It cost $1 to get what you need in the drug den. So people kept swooping by, saw us strangers, and then left. I kind of felt bad. We were disrupting business. I apologized to Norma, and she laughed. Business? It cost $1. It's not business. So while we were sitting there, I can't stress enough, we were treated with such hospitality, like guests in their space. This guy, I think about him sometimes. He was full of lesions. I'd never seen anybody like him so close. I saw him go in and out of consciousness. It's the weirdest sight. It's like he died and then he comes back to life and then he just starts talking, picking up where we left off. So I saw him tie up his arm. He cleaned his needle. He cleaned his space. I mean, look at this image of him. He has hand sanitizer around his belt. He did everything with dignity and order, and he shot up his arm, and he was actually such a gentleman because before he took his hit, he offered me his needle. And I said, no, thank you. I'd never witnessed anything like that in real life before. He was just talking to me and I was just trying to treat him like nothing was weird about what he was doing because he was acting like nothing was weird. At some point, Fitz and I, we make eye contact. We're like, hey, Norma, do you think that we'll be able to chat today? The sun was setting. We had less than 2 hours left. See, Norma ended up being our second best alternative. Chabela, the queen, the reason we were there, was in her drug gaze the entire time, never said a word while we were there, and we were there for around an hour. Now, I laugh at myself for having such patience, was so naive, so ignorant, for depending on timing of crackheads. That's what Norma called herself. And she was so fascinating to me, college educated, and our conversations were sophisticated and relevant. She was the first in-person example I had of a functioning crackhead. With an hour of daylight, we got our interview. We asked if we could do it on the fort walls so that we and our expensive camera gear could be outside of La Perla by nightfall. Now, I know two things that allowed for access like this. One, for sure, is my interview style. I worked hard in my career to make people feel comfortable when talking to me. It's a skill set I'm proud of. But the second is because we're brown. I have no doubt about that. A big sigh of relief for our adventure. We all felt this endorphin rush. Hector got his wife and his kids. We bought some beers and we danced on the fort's walls into the night.